Hey everybody, welcome to week 3 of Breedinum Radio, and we have got a couple good stories coming to you on this part. We might have a part 2, might not, all depends on whether we can cross some schedules up with some other guys, but this one is going to be with Brad Cimino and Ryan Van Loo, both connected this past weekend on some nice Western New York bucks, so we'll hear the breakdown of their stories, and I am looking forward to that. So Big Jim interviewed Ryan, and I interviewed Brad. So you'll hear a couple different. I haven't listened to Jimmy's yet, so it might be a classic log talk with Big Jim, or it might just be right to the business. Sounds like it was right to the business. So I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. And congrats to Big Jim on a great buck today on the 28th of October. Jimbo shot a buck that we have a special name for, which I will not share because it may be offensive to some, but it is it's not a bad term. It just may be offensive, so I will hold that there. But Jimbo shot a buck that we were all seeing a lot on the camera, and we'll let him tell his story. But he is going to connect with John Teeter from Whitetail Landscapes. We've had John on here a couple times, and John shot a beautiful 10-point out in central New York this past weekend as well. So Jimmy and John are going to get together. Jimmy John, they're going to get together and have a sneaky quick podcast for you that I'll drop next Monday. So that'll be Monday, November 2nd. There'll be a podcast with Jimmy and John as they break down their successful hunts from this past week. So thank you all for following along. Good luck this weekend. I keep saying this, and I hope my luck comes together, but the weather is looking prime, and hopefully everything lines up, and you can notch your tag, as I hope I do as well. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you listening. Tell a friend. Help us keep growing this thing. Fade 'em.
Breedinum Radio, brought to you by Pertinier Outdoors, your source for all things deer hunting and the rut here in New York State, right in your backyard, so you can get up in the stand and pound them all season long.
What a night. What a night. Brad Cimino, can you hear me?
Couple tries, but we're in.
Can you hear me, Brad?
I can hear you.
Brad. Okay, now
Can you hear me?
Now I'm just being a smartass. I can hear you just fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, what a nice Tuesday night here at the Harvey residence. Yep. Yep. Word for the wise,
I guess
Brad.
after I called you earlier, I
Word for the
take
wise.
it easy on kids, huh?
Don't bring up COVID and the presidential election on the most exciting week of the year hunting-wise, and then lead into the discussion about how you're going to be gone for potentially 3 days to hunt. Fart in church, sir. Fart in church.
Could imagine.
Yeah. So enough about me, Brad. Welcome to Breedinum Radio, and that can mean only one thing, that you had some success recently. So congrats on a great Western New York buck, and wanted to get you on here to share the story and hear a little bit about the setup and the scenario, how it all came together for you. So I guess first, just introduce yourself, kind of where you're from, and some of your hunting experience, whether it's primarily here around Western New York, or if you've ventured elsewhere, kind of what your background is a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Brad Cimino. I grew up in North Tonawanda, New York area. Wasn't a hunter, my entire youth life, and got started about 8 years ago. Never owned a gun, had no family that hunted, but had a couple of buddies that got me into bow hunting. And I think that first season I hunted every single day that year, and ended up killing a nice Pope and young whitetail with my bow during the gun season, and been hooked ever since. So I, becoming an adult, moved around a bunch for my career. So I started hunting all over Western New York when I first got into it, and then moved to Pennsylvania. I was down there for 3 years and did hunting in both New York and Pennsylvania every year. And I, was fortunate enough, I should say, to meet my wife and get married and move back home. We're both from the area, and now I'm living in Holland, New York. and hunting just about every county in Western New York at this point, and then doing some out-of-state stuff, more and more by the year.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's kind of a cool background and interesting to hear. It seems like there's a lot of guys similar to yourself that we're not lifelong hunters, and in a way I wonder sometimes if you might be better off than some of us that grew up completely engulfed in it and learning the ways of the people we were around from a young age. Not that that's a bad thing, but you definitely kind of get ingrained into a certain culture and a certain way of approaching things. And when you're a little bit older and maybe learning on your own or learning from someone else that's maybe a little bit older, I think you learn in a different way, and you kind of develop yourself more as an individual, not as learning directly from somebody that you're surrounded with, whether it be a father or mentor, or grandfather, whatever.
Yeah, I got pretty fortunate. A couple of years after I started hunting, I ended up in guys that have been on the podcast, Jamie Mann, Paul and Scott Murray, Ryan Van Loo. I got introduced to those guys pretty early on. So some of the guys that I hunted with when I first got started were very good influences of the right way to do it. It kind of was a blessing and a curse. The first buck I ever shot with my bow just happened to still be, to this day, my best one. So I was just, from the beginning, obsessed with wanting to shoot a mature buck every year, in one way or another, almost every year since I've been fortunate enough to do so in Western New York. And I think a lot of it has to do with those guys that got me started, and then just an unhealthy obsession with trying to figure out how I could do it with a level of consistency.
Yep. That is a good way of explaining it, unhealthy obsession. But that is an opinion of other people. So I support your obsession and it's a healthy, I'll sit here on my high horse and say it's a healthy decision. So cool stuff, man. I appreciate you sharing your background there, and definitely cool to know where you're coming from. So let's jump right into what the scenario was this past weekend and kind of what led you up to this buck you shot.
Yeah, so I'm spread pretty thin as far as the areas that I try to keep tabs on to hunt. And the last couple of years, I've been getting more and more into the trail cameras, and I'd say that, most recent information, I bought a bunch of those Tacticam Reveal cell cameras. Could not tell you enough good things about how much that has helped, being able to get information immediately, because I used to be super lazy with checking cameras. So probably mid-October, I started switching a lot of my cameras from field edges and funnels that I know that I can get pictures of deer from, to mock scrapes or scrapes that I found while scouting. And, spent most of the beginning of October scouting for deer more so than hunting deer, and ended up getting a couple of pictures over the last 10 days of the buck I ended up shooting, either middle of the night, just after last light, just before first light in the morning. And I think Saturday night, Sunday morning, 1:30 in the morning was the last photo I had of them hitting a scrape. So when I woke up Sunday morning, I had a totally different plan of where I wanted to hunt. My wife's a big bow hunter as well. She wanted to go hunt at a farm that we hunt on together. When she woke up and saw the weather and the wind, she said, I'm not going to go out. You're on your own. So once I to her, and then I saw my picture of that buck from the night before, so I'm going to go in there after him. I think I could get in real tight to his bedding and try to catch him coming back, because I know I've only got a short window if he's walking in daylight to get him before he's back to that bedding area.
Yeah. So that was one of my main questions was, what was your setup? Because I've been having this thought and this conversation with a few different people since this prior weekend, because I was really excited about what this past weekend was going to entail, and it didn't pan out that way on the property that I hunt, the farm here with my in-laws. And, it started to get me thinking, is that I keep doing the same thing every single year, and I have the same results every single year. And so I was very interested to talk to guys like you and the other guys that we're going to have on here this week to hear what the setup was that got you in that situation to shoot that deer. So you kind of explained why you did what you did, but you made that aggressive move to get into where you thought. Were you in his bedding, or were you on the outside of his bedding trying to catch him coming back? What exactly was your setup?
So all the scrape activity that I'm seeing, and I've got mature bucks on camera that I'm getting in daylight or close to over the last 7 days, but they're all scrapes that relate to bedding and being close to bedding. In the one farm I hunt, there's no good bedding close to the fields. So a lot of those bucks bed further away and travel there to feed at night. And those scrapes will be active at night, and I'll get pictures in the middle of the night. But I don't think that helps at this point to get close to those deer, because I still don't think they're walking mature bucks as much during daylight as they will be in another 7 days. So I had scouted when it rained probably a week ago and found 2 fresh scrapes. They'd just been opened up within that 24 hours, I'd say, around a little bedding area that I've got that I hunt. And it's, to describe it, it's a really thick, nasty swamp, and it's got a ridge that drops down on both sides, and everything around it is pretty open hardwoods. And the scrapes that I found are on either side of it. So the pictures I had of that deer, being so close to daylight, my thinking was that he's in that bedding area, and the only way I'm going to get a shot at him is getting nice and tight to it. So I had a good wind so that I could, that transition of that hardwood to swamp, I can't get in that swamp without busting them out if they're already in there. And I didn't want to be that aggressive right away. So my thought was, if I could get, on the backside of that swamp to where I think he'd be coming in from being out all night feeding or looking for does, I'd catch him coming back in on the entrance trail to that swamp. Well, okay. Lo and behold, I think we've talked about it a little bit. I started hunting when I've been hunting with a lone wolf for years. I started hunting with a saddle a couple of years ago, and being mobile helped a ton. I was able to set up on a trail that I had found going into that swamp when I had scouted about a week ago. And, first light in the morning, I never would have expected it. I'm usually pretty pessimistic about whether my aggressive moves will ever work. But, first light, he was coming right back into bed, and I ended up catching him. He, got to about 30 yards before I took the shot.
Yeah. So how early, because Sunday morning, and you're not far from us. So Sunday morning was dead quiet. Like, it was silent in the woods. There was hardly any wind. It was kind of a little bit, it was frosty. It was below freezing where I was. I'm sure it was where you were too. So how was that? How early did you get in there, and did you bump any deer on your way in?
I didn't bump anything on my way in, at least not that I knew of. I guess it's hard to describe it without you seeing it on a map, how it lays out. But my access into that spot we had an east-northeast where I'm at, and it was very light, but I probably started walking, and it's not a far walk. I mean, 300-400 yards at most. So it only takes a few minutes to get to where I was going. Mm-hmm. And I actually had to walk around that entire bedding area to get there. So I took a really long route, but I probably left and started walking at 6:15. I got to that spot at probably 6:30, and I was up and set up by 6:45.
Yeah.
So
that was in a tree that did you know what tree you were going to on? And I find this fascinating because it's one of the things that it is challenging, especially morning hunts when you want to get mobile and you want to be aggressive. Knowing, like, not having a plan as to what tree, that can be really tough, because sometimes you're standing there in the dark trying to figure out where you need to be. And I've done it before, and set up on the wrong side of the tree, or the sun comes up and you realize you have no shooting lanes where you're looking. And if you would have been on another tree or on the other side of the tree, you'd be in a perfect setup, So were you prepared for that tree, or was that just blind luck that you picked the right tree and got up in it?
Well, from my scouting, right, I knew that I had to be so close to where that trail was going into that swamp. There's a couple of fallen trees on either side of that trail, so I know that there's one spot that those deer were going in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the scouting prior to, and that's something over the last few years, just in general, I've figured out, is that you can't scout enough to understand it. So going in blind in the mornings is something I don't frequently do, because it, like you said, it's hard to pick the tree. You end up there and you don't have a shooting lane, right? Or you're loud, or something always ends up screwed up.
Yeah.
So a lot of those morning hunts are places that I've scouted. I had no idea what tree I was going to get in, and I ended up picking probably the worst tree that I could have picked, because it was so big around.
Yeah.
It was so hard to reach my strap around that tree. And I'm pretty dialed in with my setup, with my sticks and my saddle, and I'm up one trip. I'm probably up in 7-8 minutes and done. Blow up the tree, on the hanger, the whole nine. And I just knew I found the tree in the dark, and I knew I had to be that close, but it was so big and it was so frustrating. So I took a lot longer than I normally would to get up.
Mm-hmm.
I just did my best to be quiet, because I didn't want to bust anything out of there.
So I got some gear follow setup questions to follow up on that, but I guess kind of we talked, you kind of gave the lead up to the buck coming in. So he came in the trail that you anticipated, that you set up on, and I guess play it from there. He comes in, you said he kind of got it right in on you quick at first light. So was it right around 7:15, 7:30 when he came in?
I think first light that day, I want to say it was like 7:40, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember the time off the top of my head, but I remember I was set up for so long in that tree. My dad was actually texting me, big baseball fan, asked me if I watched, the Dodgers blow the game the other night.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my phone, shouldn't have been. So I put it down because I saw that it was legal light. It had hit 7:40 or 7:42. And when I looked up, that buck was actually at 40 yards and on a beeline walking straight at me. So this area that I'm in, I've got pictures of a couple decent 2-year-old bucks. And then I had that buck and another nice, what I think is a 4-year-old 10-point on camera. And I kind of panicked because I couldn't get my binoculars, my rangefinder, and my bow all up at the same time. So I'm like fiddling around with all this gear, and I said, I don't have time. I just picked up my rangefinder and I picked a spot on that trail where I thought he'd get to. And just from first glance, I go right into my shooting process when I see something I think it's what I want to shoot. So I range a spot, and he was coming in, and I, got my bow off the hook and all set. And he came in and got to about 30 yards and then started walking straight away from me, quartering away pretty hard. So I was already drawn back. I didn't want to stop the deer. I thought if he doesn't stop on his own, he's going into that swamp and I'm not getting a shot. Because past 30 yards, I really don't like to shoot. That's my comfort zone, shooting a bow at a deer.
Yep.
And that seemed to have worked fine for me to this point. So anything further than that, I think there's too much margin for error. But, he took another 2 steps, got to about 32 yards, and just stopped on his own. So I thought, it's about now or never, and executed my shot, and it went off. And, deer took off on the shot, took off into the swamp, and I heard him slopping around down in the water. And I thought to myself, man, I just missed that stinking deer. And I'm pissed. I couldn't see my arrow hit the deer. And so I'm texting my wife. I just missed that buck behind the house. I was real upset. And I gave it about an hour, and I said, come out here, drive out, meet me. We'll go look for the arrow, the whole nine, and we'll see what happens. Depending on what we find, we'll go look for him. Well, 15 minutes later, I heard some thrashing around down in that swamp behind me. I'm like, man, he's got to be alive in there chasing around other deer. So lo and behold, my wife gets out there about an hour and a half later. She meets me. It's like 9 o'clock now. It's been about an hour and a half since I shot. So we get out and we're looking for my arrow and I don't find it. Well, we end up walking up and there's just blood splattered all over the ground, all over all the trees next to it. Like, we're going to find him. He's dead. He's got to be close. So, about 50, 60 yards from where I'd shot that deer, he tipped over in that swamp, and that thrashing I heard was he had bedded down once. We found a big pool of blood where he had bedded. And it's a good thing I didn't get down right away or make a ton of noise right away or do anything to spook him, because he had bedded down. I think what I heard was him trying to get up 15 minutes later and take off again. Well, we had found him, and he had tipped over, legs straight out, like he was on a full walk or a run. And he had expired right there 5 yards from his bed.
No kidding. Yeah, so you just tried to make one last shot at it. What'd you hit on? Do you know what you hit vitals-wise?
Yeah, so I ended up hitting him actually a lot further back than I had hoped. He was quartering away pretty hard, so I felt pretty confident with the arrow setup that I'm using that I'd get the penetration I needed. So I went in almost by the hind quarter all the way out through the second rib. So I hit, unfortunately, everything. So you could imagine it was a pretty horrendous field dress job.
Yeah.
But, he was quartering away harder than I would have liked, but I'm shooting a fairly heavy arrow. And, where he was standing, I was aiming further forward, but I had some trees in the way, little saplings and everything. So I was trying to avoid those and hit a little bit further back than I wanted. But, he made it all of 60, 65 yards from where I had shot him. Bled like a stuck pig.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a lot of times they bed down and unfortunately and fortunately, a lot of times that's what happens, that they bed down, unless you heart shoot them and they just run wide open and just flip over dead, that's an ideal situation, obviously. But a lot of times, and I've had a couple archery kills over the last 2 years that the deer, you hit them pretty good, one long or two longs, and they end up going and bedding down. And I've had them do it in eyesight, I'd prefer that they run off in the bushes and do that in private. I don't necessarily need to watch that entire process, but I think that's fairly common for them to get to a bed up, and then it seems like they try to make one last, whether it's that surge of adrenaline or whatever it is, they're trying to make one last ditch effort to get up and get out of there, and just try to survive. They're just on that last leg, and it's pretty tough to watch. I'd prefer, like I said, for them to just take off like a bat out of hell and go over the ridge, and I'll just know that you're expiring and I don't need to watch it happen. But it is kind of a humbling, sobering thing to watch. Even if it only takes a minute for it to happen, it's not the funnest thing to witness, but that is the reality of what's going on.
Right. And sounds similar to me. I have a serious moral compass to not wanting to shoot an animal and it doesn't expire as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'll definitely get some flack from some of my buddies if they listen to it. I unfortunately have made some pretty bad shots on deer over the years. And, my wife always teases me is I was probably within inches of having a third of the wall that I have now because just poor shots or poor shot selection. And that's something that, over the years I've really worked on. Yeah. And hence the arrow setup that on marginal shots, I didn't have to worry so much. And I can't say enough about how much that matters because there's so many guys shooting severely underspined arrows and big mechanical broadheads and think that because they're shooting 70 pounds, they could put the arrow wherever they want.
Right.
And if you watch as much as I do on social media, every other day it's someone posting about how they need a dog to track their deer.
Yeah.
And despite the bad shots I've made over the years, I've lost one buck ever that I shot in the shoulder the second year I hunted.
Yeah.
And every other deer I found, it's just, you got to do your due diligence, right? And I think tracking too early and in a poor setup to shoot them with,
yeah,
right, has a lot to do with that.
And that's the reality of what we're doing. We're killing, and you're trying to kill an animal that's trying to survive. And whether it's you making a mistake, you being the hunter, or if it's the animal, reacting to the shot or doing something you didn't anticipate. I mean, things very rarely go perfect in the deer woods. And that's just the reality of it. So, you want everyone to have that perfect experience, and you owe it to the animal to practice and prepare yourself for that opportunity. But things can and will go wrong, and it's how you respond to that, which is important, whether it is a follow-up shot or it's putting in the effort to try to find that animal or give it the time it needs. There's just a lot that goes into it, and I think we've got a time right now where there's a ton of new hunters, and a lot of them that I've heard from and spoken to, I think many of them this year, a lot of these new hunters were super serious about getting into it and put a lot of practice and a lot of time in. So they were prepared, and a lot of them have made great quality shots on their first animals they've killed. But that's a wonderful thing, but that may not be the reality every time. So just, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you are new and haven't experienced the lows of deer hunting, or whether you're shooting deer or bear or any kind of game that you're out hunting, there's going to be that opportunity. There's going to be that time that things might go a little bit sideways, and you got to hold it together, pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to your surroundings, and, lean on other people. If you have a question, post it on. It blows my mind, the interaction that happens on these Facebook pages. Some of it is ridiculous, but some of it's incredibly good. I see like that New York hunt only, or whatever that Facebook page is. I mean, somebody will post a picture of blood that they've got, and they're looking for guidance. I mean, they'll get 100+ responses in 10 minutes. It's incredible, but, use the resources. Don't just walk away and say, well, we missed them, must have gotten away. It's like, you got to, just like Billy Madison says, you got to go find that effing dog, that's just the reality.
Yeah, I agree. Effort's a big thing, you know.
You owe it to the animal. All right. Well, quickly, I appreciate the story. Congrats. It was an awesome buck, and cool to hear that story. And I think one of the things I've learned, and I look forward to hearing, my brother's doing a couple of these recordings, and I look forward to hearing the other guys that were successful. But the common theme seems like everybody who had success, for the most part, was pretty damn close to betting and getting in tight, because the bucks aren't necessarily moving that far right now. And that's about to change. There'll be a lot of wandering here in the next 7 to 10 days, like you were saying. But this past weekend, if you were sitting somewhere in a transition zone like I was, and like I always do this time of year, apparently, you probably didn't see a whole lot. And that was my experience. So it was kind of cool to hear your story and hear exactly how that all played out for you, situation-wise.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate you giving me a call and wanting to hear about it.
Yeah. Hey, the last thing I wanted to touch back on the gear. I'm just curious, because it's something I've been talking with Danny about the last few days. I talked with Dallas about it on the podcast that I put out on Monday. I'm just curious what you're being you said you got your system pretty dialed in for your saddle and getting up the tree. What are you using for sticks? And I think you said you're using a tethered saddle, but you're using a saddle. Saddle's a saddle for the most part. But what are you using for sticks and a bag or a carrying system to get yourself up the tree?
So this will be my third season in one. I've actually got the original Kestrel. So I got into a saddle with the Kestrel, and then, the tethered saddle came out, got rid of that. I actually liked the Kestrel better. But it definitely takes some time to figure out what works for you. For me, I've got a gear hook on the back of my saddle that I actually carry on my platform with most times. A lot of the spots we go around Western New York, you're not hiking all that far. I don't even carry a bag most times. Most of the hunts I do are within a reasonable walk, that I'm using 3 I have Lone Wolf Custom Gear mini sticks with the cable aiders.
Mm-hmm.
And I started using the Amsteel daisy chains instead of the metal cam straps, just for the sake of being quieter. And there's a YouTube video, I could send it to you, I found somewhere, and there's actually different ways you could use those to attach so that the sticks get incredibly tight to the tree. So I'll probably get 14, 15 feet, and I'm not very tall, so I can't stretch them out all that far.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll probably get 14, 15 feet with those 3 sticks in my platform, and that's usually what I'll carry on shorter walks to hunt. You know, I'll put the first stick on the tree, and then I actually put the second and third stick through what would be the bridge loops on my saddle.
Okay.
So as I'm going up the tree, they're attached to me, and I'll pull one off at a time and put them on as I'm going up. So it's always in one trip. You know, I take my time, but I've done it enough times that I know how to do it pretty quickly and quietly. And I tie my bow off to my saddle when I'm on the ground. And so once I get up, that's all I got to do is pull my bow up and I'm set.
Nice.
You know, I hunt a lot of the public locally in Western New York, Pennsylvania. Did a lot of scouting in Ohio and plan to hit that this year. Those longer walks, I have a Mystery Ranch pop-up pack. And so some of those longer walks in, I actually pack my platform right onto there and my sticks in the pack and my layers on the pack, and I don't wear my layers in. And I'll just get ready at the tree and then go from there. Same way, back up and down the tree, but I never carry my pack up the tree. You know, I've got enough pouches on that saddle that everything I actually need while I'm hunting, I try to keep it minimal, is with me. You know, grunt tube, strap for my bow, my release, and a rangefinder. You know, I don't like to have a ton of stuff up in the tree, and I see a lot of guys are like packing a suitcase and bringing it up the tree with them.
Right.
You know, and then the camera arms and GoPros. And I mean, I already think that when you're up there, if you're in the right tree and you know where the deer are coming from, you could use that tool to stay behind the tree and not need a lot of cover to be hidden, especially if you know what you're doing with the wind and the terrain. But once you've got packs and everything else hanging off of the tree, it's more stuff to carry up, more stuff that could go wrong. You know, so I leave it at the bottom of the tree. I go up there in my layers. I got everything I need right on my waist.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. I'm a backpack guy. Even when I'm hunting on the farm, I carry my backpack. I just like having my stuff. But I definitely see the value of just going super light and not having all that stuff. And that makes it a lot quicker when you hit the tree that you can get right up. But that's cool. I appreciate you sharing that setup, and makes everybody kind of think it's always good to hear what other people are using, because it makes you kind of think about how you're approaching things and is there a better way to do it. So that's pretty cool.
Right on. Yeah. So, I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, buddy. Well, thanks for hopping on this week. Congrats, and appreciate you supporting the podcast. And tell a friend, and go fill that second tag, and maybe fill one out in PA and Ohio for us too. Get you back on.
Do my best.
All right, Brad. Thanks, buddy.
Right.
Take it easy.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye.
All right. We are here with Ryan Van Loo. We had you on the Breedinum Radio segment back in the spring with turkey hunting. You got a nice bird in our competition there. Yeah. So sounds like you had some luck this past weekend. Punched your buck tag, and we wanted to touch base with you and hear all about that.
Yeah, it was a pretty good hunt. My dad actually went in there. I left work Friday, hunted with Scott. We saw, I think, 4 does and 2 fawns, a little food plot. And my dad was at the swamp stand. And he didn't see nothing until 6:30. Text saying, "Mother, you know what, effort." You know, he's just like, I just had a big buck at 15 yards, and he caught my wind. And he went in there on kind of a little marginal wind. I mean, north wind's best, but I don't know what the hell wind he was hunting. I think it was a west wind he was hunting, so it was kind of blowing back behind him when the buck came up out of the swamp. And he said when he got out of this, or when he went into the stand, there was one scrape right in front of the stand. There's always a pretty big one there. And but he said on his way out, he said there's 2 more scrapes. And so I checked the camera, and there was a couple really good deer. Actually, the 20th, the scrape got opened. He went in the 19th. Got a mock scrape going on at 20th. The one real big 8-pointer hit it at night. And then an absolute giant 6-pointer came by at like 3:33, I think it was, coming from the north, heading south. And then the next 2 days, there's 2 more big 8-pointers in daylight on it, all like 4 or 5 o'clock. And so then that next morning, it was north wind, and it's pretty light. And if you hunt on if you kind of hunted on anything over 10 miles an hour, the thermals in there swirl, but it was like 5 to 10. So I got in there, climbed up the tree. It was just a disaster off the bat. Got the camera set. Well, I had the arm set up and then the bracket, and realized I forgot the camera in the truck. Arm and just thought, yeah, it is what it is. And the morning was actually kind of slow for everybody. I think my dad saw a doe and a fawn, and then my dad's buddy Chris was up and he saw 2 fawns. And I just kept looking at that scrape. I mean, it just smelled like buck piss in there. And I mean, there was 3 more scrapes from the night before that were opened up in there. And it was like 8:30. It was like 8 o'clock. Actually, I looked up, thought I heard a grunt up towards the cabin to the north, and I saw a doe come running out of the brush. Saw a second doe, saw a third doe, and got binoculars up. And they were only 65 yards, but it was all logged, just kind of like this little funnel along the swamp. And I just looked up and I hit the binocular. I seen the heavy bases on them, and that's really the last I saw. He came in and 30 yards, came in, shot him. And he took off running, and I was kind of like, oh, wow, season's kind of over, which you kind of hate that feeling. But
oh, I know. He
took off running, ran down to the swamp, and I got down, and there was blood just pumping everywhere. So I tracked him like 80 yards. I have a hard time seeing blood in the grass, so I called Scott, and he met me at 10, he got out at 9, met me at like 9:45, and we started tracking. And I mean, the shot I thought the blood trail was unbelievable. And we ended up going like 200 yards. He crossed the swamp. I mean, blood pouring everywhere. And I'm kind of like, man. He said, "Did you one lung him?" I'm like, he turned a little into the arrows I shot, just after I stopped him. But I watched the arrow sticking out of him 6-7 inches. And so I knew I buried it right through him. And we ended up jumping him at probably like 10 to 11. I mean, he ran 100 yards in a matter of 2 seconds, and he went 60 yards in a matter of an hour and a half. So you knew he was hurting. And the way he was bleeding there in the grass, you could tell he was kind of looking for a spot to get up. So he jumped up actually up on the Murray's property. We went in like 40 yards, jumped him. So we just backed out and waited an hour, went back. And I mean, he only ran another maybe 20 yards from where we jumped. He was laying dead actually in the Wheeler Trail.
That's convenient.
Yeah, I mean, and then since the 20th, it's been on fire. I mean, there's a lot of deer killed the 24th and 25th. And I mean, now that my cell cameras are going, I mean, the last 3 nights I've had good deer in front of them. I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me,
Right.
But
I
mean,
so that was Saturday the 24th. You got that one?
Yeah. And shot him at 8. I mean, I'm getting them like o'clock, and then flew back and watched the UFC fights and just kind of hung out and drank a couple bush lights and really just kind of.
Well, I can never do a podcast without drinking beer. So I know you're working, but I'm not. So I'm gonna have a bush light for you.
Back in, but I mean, it's just. I don't know. It's like sad every time you shoot one. You're just like, now your season's it's not over because you can still shoot some does, but I mean, the magical time of year is coming. So you just hop in a tree with somebody and watch. And
yeah, no, I thought Friday into Saturday there was going to be money, but we did not see much movement down at our camp.
Really weird because like our side of the swamp is on fire, and then like Murray's side wasn't really tore up at all. But, at least it's a mile down the road. The 25th, I think it was 7 different bucks in that plot from 4 o'clock till a little after dark, chasing does back and forth, hitting the scrape. I mean, it was crazy. But now yesterday, I figured after that rain stopped, it'd be great. I didn't have any daily. I got 4 cell cams on scrapes. And the only picture I had since yesterday morning, which I had a really nice buck yesterday morning at like 11:30 hit a scrape, was this morning at 10:34, a little 4-pointer going to hit the one. So I don't know if it's like going to be like the real hot day, then cold, then hot, and then it'll explode. But
I think probably over the next week here it'll start to explode. But it's not like we saw a ton of action early, and then like the last week it died right off, and we haven't seen much of any action. But
I really didn't hunt much this year. I was hunting one of my uncles there, and he actually got killed by the neighbor, and that deer was just a beauty. And I had him I had his bed picked out with a cell cam on. I mean, it was like when I found out he got killed, I was like, man, my buddy just died. Like he was so. My wife, why are you waking up at 2 a.m? I'm like, oh, just to wait to see his picture because he was so. That deer was like, within an hour, I'd get a picture of him on cell cam between 2 and 4 in the morning. He'd always be coming in the morning, east to west. Well, I got a picture of him. I lost him for like 3 weeks. We was originally bedding all summer in this little apple orchard. And after them acorns fell, he was out of there. So then the one day I was driving in, and there was a whole bunch of rubs up along the driveway heading to this cornfield. So there was just 2 main runs. And I was like, I put a cell cam on each. And that night I had a picture of him. I had him like a week straight. So I just went in there, found another big hemlock rub, found a bed, put a camera on it. And I mean, he was there every day. But he'd come and hang out for like 7 to 10 days. Then he'd go disappear for 2 to 3. Well, friggin', I went in, put a mock scrape up, and put a mock scrape up in there. And I had a picture of him like first night, second night, third night. Well, September 28th, I had a picture of him at like 5:30, 6, 6:30, just crushing a scrape. Well, he hit it 3 times. Then a little buck came in from the west, hit it, headed east. Well, that buck came east-west, but left going to the east. And I was just like, damn, if somebody's hunting next door, he's getting killed. And apparently the guy that shot him didn't know anything about that deer. But he just followed his little finger along this cornfield, and he was in the neighbor's woods. And he shot him, I think, the second night. Because I hunted the day after I didn't know he was dead. I hunted it. I'm like, damn, I didn't see him, but because he was dead.
Yeah, because he's dead. I actually we got back from cutting deer last night, and I got a friend's request from a guy that's down by our camp. And I recognized his name, so I accepted him. I sent him a message. I was like, "Hey, you still living over there on such and such road?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." And then he messaged me back. He goes, "You guys don't happen to have a huge drop, like 150s, 160s drop time buck on camera, do you?" And I'm like, "Oh Christ, he knows about Frank."
Yeah.
So we got to talking with. I got to talking with him last night, and he said that that thing summers across the street from his house. Really? And kind of what we were thinking is that he summered over on that side of the road.
Yeah.
But he said that they haven't seen him in like 3 weeks, and that makes sense because he started showing up on our place.
It's crazy how far they really move.
I mean, that's probably about a mile he moves, I would say.
It was probably almost 10 years ago. Me and my dad did a show on TV, and a guy messaged me on Facebook. The one buck we're trying to kill was just a mainframe 8 with a huge kicker off his left or his right side off the G2. And, our cabin's weird because we don't have any ag fields or nothing. I mean, it's crazy. It's like there's nothing around except across the road. But you drive by there at night, there's 70, 80 deer in it. And then 10 miles away is probably the first cornfield and maybe beans every couple of years. But this kid, hey, that deer that was on your guys' farm, he's always in ours in the summer. Well, that's 3-4 miles away.
Yeah.
But we got a swamp in between us and Murray's that literally when those get chased, they all just, if you hit it right there, it gets pretty wild.
Yeah, it was funny. I told him that my buddy missed him on opening day of gun last year.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, our neighbor missed him twice off the front porch during gun last year. I mean, they live out in the middle of nowhere, so. But I was like, so how many people know about this deer? He goes, half the damn town. I'm like, damn it.
The thing, too, is, there's so many scums out there to go jack like that deer.
Well, that's what he said. He said there's people driving up this road every night spotlighting. They're just hay fields, but he goes, they're spotlighting these fields every night. He goes, I'm afraid that thing's going to get whacked.
Yeah, there's up at our cabin a couple years ago, a couple got shot at night. It's just
I don't know what you get out of it, really, but.
Does it make you feel like a bigger person? I don't know. To me,
it wouldn't do anything for me.
I shot him at night. Oh, that's great. 100% illegal. That's
right. I had him at 15 yards last year and didn't have a buck tag in my pocket, so I couldn't shoot him.
Even want to go out because I did a couple years ago. I shot another 2.5-year-old, and I shot him like a 26th or 7th, and I went literally to hunt a stand. I've never got a buck pitch on that year, and I had probably 115 20-inch 8 just for a half an hour. Hit a scrape, bed down. I'm just like, this is terrible, So now I'm just like, I'll just go sit with somebody because I don't even want to. That was terrible.
So were you hunting over a scrape? Is that what you were doing?
That's great. I mean, it's 30 yards. I mean, it's this beech tree, and then every year it just gets tore up with scrapes in there. And it's just, I mean, I shot my first buck there, I don't know, how old am I, 18 years ago. And I was laughish. I was like, I haven't hunted stand in 3 years. Because usually, I mean, I usually hunt down the road. And then open day, I'll go way back behind the cabin. And usually my dad, it's close, but it's one of them spots that deer always cruise it, and they always have. And it's just, I mean, I saw that 4 days in a row, there was a nice deer in daylight on that. I mean, 3 days in a row, they were beauties. And then a really nice 8-pointer, and then that one I shot. But I was just like, north wind, perfect for that. I mean, there's no doubt I'm going there. So I asked my dad, where are you going?
Did you know about that buck, or was he a new cruiser?
Him in like July, or not July, September, like 17th, 18th, or like mid-September. I got a picture of him. And as soon as I shot him, I see him turn. I was like, oh, that's a deer I shot. Like, I just knew. I mean, I don't know. Everyone asked me, like, I pinned deer. I know what he looks like. Everyone else was like, I knew he was a shooter, you know. But the day before, my dad was like, that buck hit at 15 yards. He was like 18 inches wide and real heavy. As soon as I glassed him, I saw his base. I'm like, oh, it's him, you know. That's the last thing. I was like, binoculars down, ranged the doe. As soon as I ranged her, she took off when he grunted, and I just grabbed my bow, and I was like, now or never. Drew back, stopped him, shot. And as soon as he turned, I was like, well, he's not 18 inches wide. I can tell you that. He ran down, and I mean, his base, I mean, he's got a mass all the way through. Just a beautiful 2.5-year-old.
Yeah.
And, but, I mean, heck, I'm happy. It's a nice deer for the area, so you just, hey, it is what it is.
Those ones get me every time.
Starts beating, and it's just like, you know, if he makes your heart beat, I'm shooting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll never get rid of that feeling, but it's just, like you say, you wait all year, and it just ends in the, you know, fling of an arrow.
Yeah.
And I love hunting just for, like, to get down to the cabin and hang out with guys and stuff, but I just love bow hunting. And, I mean, fun now. I've spent some time. I treated my dad. I might hunt with Scott tonight. Took off Friday, go sit with my dad, and Saturday something. I mean, I'll probably take off the first week of November and just sit with my dad, really.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. So where'd you end up hitting him? You said he ended up going a little ways there. He quartered too.
Yeah, so I shot him 30 yards broadside, and he quartered. I mean, I've never seen nothing like this. There was literally a softball hole right behind his shoulder, and when I got him out, I mean, one lung was just blue. It was like a lung. I don't even know. One blade must have hit the offside lung. I mean, I wish I could show you the picture because I'll send you on Instagram. But there's two holes on the entrance side. So I don't know if the one blade of that slick trick just ripped right down the side of him too. But I mean, it was devastating. It looked like, I mean, the exit hole is, I don't know. The exit hole was on the other side, like 6 inches back of the shoulder blade. It came out the bottom of him. But I mean, the blood, like I was telling Scott when we were tracking, I'm like, if somebody said I shot a deer, can you go track it for me and get it because I got to go to work? I'd be like, I walk up, I'm like, oh, it's a double lung deer. I mean, there's bubbles. I mean, there's blood spraying. And in the water where he went through, all the water was red. It was all frothy bubbles. And there was like a couple hunks of lung we were tracking. It was one of them things where, like, I don't know, it's just weird. Just that quarter-inch difference would have been a complete double lung and a nick of a lung.
Them deer are unbelievable, man. They'll go on nothing.
I mean, it's crazy. We were laughing. I'm like, if I got hit with an arrow, I'd lay right down. I wouldn't run anywhere. And but it was just one of them ones where, like, it didn't hit his liver, but just full on lung and then a nick of the other one. But I mean, you always wish you see him go down, but it's just one of them things. It was better to back as soon as we jumped him, back out and don't push him. He went where we jumped him, maybe 30 more yards, you know.
Yeah.
Which we could have jumped him, and probably that jump up's what killed him because I mean he lost so much blood. But because he wasn't where we found him dead too, he wasn't laying, he wasn't bedded, he was just stood there and fell over. So we probably heard him fall over.
Yeah. I mean, you probably got him back pumping enough that it just finished him off.
Because where he jumped up and then we followed him, you could tell where it was just he was walking. There was no run anymore because he jumped up and it was 3 bounds and then it was like a 10-yard walk and done. So him jumping up probably, like you said, is what killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good deer killed over the weekend. I think it's just these next 2 days of rain, then that Friday, Saturday. I mean, even next week, my brother-in-law's off. I think the 29th to the 4th. I mean, that weather looks beautiful. A couple north wind, south, but like 50 lows in the 30s. It'll be some all-day sit.
Saturday or Friday into Saturday actually looks freaking perfect. It's going to be down to the 20s, possible flurries.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
That's going to be money.
our cabin down in Chautauqua is going to be, I mean, it's cold, you know. I've been underdressed. I had like 5 sits this year. I think I've been underdressed every single one, you know.
So if you had any advice for anybody this weekend hitting the field, what would you have to say to them?
Sit as long as you can, hunt the wind, and just, I mean, if you see an active scrape, just sit on it. I mean, you know, a buck's in the area, you know he's going to work it. I mean, that one scrape there, I bet you there's 10 to 14 different bucks in there right now. I mean, not every day, every third day. And, I mean, just a matter of time. I mean, everybody's like, even at work driving around, they were cutting some trees down in Springville and stuff. There's bucks just walking through fields just aimlessly. So put your time in, hunt the wind, and just have fun, really.
Yeah.
And do when you don't shoot, and if you do, heck yeah, you know.
Keep feeding them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Hey, man, well, thanks for jumping on and making some time here during your lunch break. Congratulations, and hopefully you guys have some more luck this weekend.
Yeah, good luck to you guys, too.
All right, have a good one.